Hello and welcome. My name is Amelia Lawrence. I'm the Relationships Manager at the Crafts Council, the national charity for craft in the UK. I would like to thank Digital Crafts Festival for inviting me to host this meeting with the amazing jeweller Daphe Krinos. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Daphne, who from where I am is sitting next to me in this digital room. Daphne is renowned for her beautiful one-off pieces of jewellery using precious metals and coloured stones. Her work is in numerous collections, including the Goldsmiths Company, the Crafts Council and the V&A Museum. Daphne has also kindly provided us with a number of images of both her work and also her inspirations and photos of her inspirations. We will be showing that as a slide presentation at the beginning of the session at the start of this session. So I will just start sharing my screen. And Daphne, if I could just ask you to set off with just a little bit of background about your creative journey and your start in making, where your interest stemmed from in making as well.
Okay, thank you for having me. Shall I start now, or is that all right? Okay, I was born in Greece.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I was born in Athens in Greece. My creative journey, I guess, started from quite an early age. I was very lucky to have a wonderful grandfather who was a big literary figure in Greece, but a great fun grandfather to be with, because he was always interested in making things out of all sorts of found objects. And he passed that love of making to me probably from the age of about 8 or 10. I used to love spending time with my grandparents in order to go and mess around with all sorts of materials and have fun. I then decided to come to London to study at art college, because in Athens my options at the time were very, very limited. There was a very academic oriented school, which if I'd gone to, I would have only been able to study fine art, which was a subject I absolutely loved, but I had decided that actually making something with my hands was more appealing to me. So I came to London.
Do you think that's from your history with your granddad? Yes. As well? That stems from that?
I'm pretty sure, because I always liked messing about with my hands and doing things. And anyway, I came to London and was very, very lucky to go to Middlesex University. I suppose it was Middlesex Poly at the time. I did a foundation course which lasted an entire year, where I was able to experiment with all sorts of materials, and where actually drawing was a fundamental part of it. And I think now, in retrospect, it was the best year in terms of learning how to open my eyes and look at different things and begin to sort of design. Jewelry had not been in my mind at all when I started that course, but I think it was a project that involved me working with a bit of metal that made me really fall in love with the material. And I was kind of interested in going into sculpture at the time, but I was a little bit afraid of large-scale work. So I decided to apply to do a jewelry course at Middlesex, which I was lucky enough to get in, and spent the next 4 years learning a lot about designing. I'd say that my course was much more centered towards design than making, but also making skills, which actually enabled me to realize those designs. And what was very, very interesting in my training was the fact that I was encouraged from the very beginning of my course to actually start making mock-ups and models out of any material I could find, which immediately made sense to me, possibly because of my older history as I was growing up. So the whole world opened up for me when I started constructing objects. Like you see in those pictures, I'm still doing it. That's the way I design work now. I don't do detailed drawings or anything. I just mess about with anything I can find in the room I'm in, with a pair of scissors or, glue, bits of wire, all sorts of things. So my course was absolutely wonderful. I graduated from Middlesex in 1980, which is ancient times for most people, I suspect, who are listening today. And I was very, very lucky to be able to start my own studio by getting money from the Crafts Council, a setting up grant, which enabled me to not worry about my living expenses for a year. And I was also able to buy a lot of tools and some equipment to enable me to start my studio practice. I had decided from quite early on that I wanted to work for myself and was quite determined to make what I wanted to make. I greatly encouraged by being taken up by several galleries who were very enthusiastic, offering me to take part in lots of exhibitions. There were very different times then. It was. I feel now that it was much easier for people like me. The competition was smaller, and I was able to start my practice and do quite well. Certainly from a lot of encouragement from all these people. Amelia seems to have disappeared. Is she there?
Oh, I am here. Can you see me?
Okay.
I did disappear for a bit, so I apologise if I came back to the slideshow at the wrong part. Just the problems of the digital age, I'm afraid, and the internet. So that's great. So Daphne, did you feel like when you started out your jewellery making, you were quite free to do the type of jewellery that you're interested in?
I was, and I think
away.
Yes, I did. That's why I said I now feel I was extraordinarily lucky. At the time, I wasn't necessarily aware of these things. I was just full of energy and really wanting to realize my ideas that were in my head. I now feel very grateful that I was able to do so. And it kind of felt quite easy. And it's become, jewelry making has become my life, really. It's something that I'm still feeling very enthusiastic about. I still want to evolve. I'm still coming up with new ideas and wanting to push things forward. I don't really enjoy staying in one place for too long. I don't know if people can tell that with my work because because I'm forever playing around with different bits of inspiration, I mean, different materials. It's just that I often think there's not enough time to do all that, but I'm sort of trying. And
yeah, can I ask you about those ideas and where those ideas stem from?
Yes, well, I feel really, really lucky because I come from Greece, where I spent the first 18 years of my life, and I made the UK my home. So I was born in a big city, and I chose to live in another big city, which both are very, very different, but a lot of my influences come from living in a city. A lot of the shapes that subsequently made their way into my work do come from a lot of buildings, a lot of man-made structures, if you want. But also the wonderful quality of light in Greece, which I greatly miss here in the UK, and the colours of summer. I suppose because I live in the UK, I spent in the past however many years or so until 2020, spent all my summers in Greece. So the sort of colours of Greek summers have snuck into my work. I sometimes think that my gold work represents the Greece in me.
I was going to ask actually, and then the darker pieces are more sort of the grey of the UK in a way, in the city of London.
Yeah, very much so, because I'm really quite sensitive to light and the different quality of light. I love the light in the UK. I love the light in January on a sunny day, which is really, really, really low and creates amazing shadows. So a lot of the models I construct are often made out of black card, which I put on a white surface and then shine a big light or take them to the sunlight. And they create wonderful exaggerated shadows, which I often incorporate in the shapes that I use in my work. So
in a way, I quite a lot of your work is about negative and positive space, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the negative space is as important in formulating your pieces.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And my slightly earlier work, not the very early work, but I suppose the work that started from 2000 onwards, was a lot about open structures and lines, very, very simple lines, and the shadows that those created. And more recently, my shapes have become a lot more solid. That's possibly because I'm quite into looking at brutalist architecture, and the positive and negative side shapes within brutalist architecture are particularly interesting.
Ironically, we've got positive and negative rings that is on the image as we speak.
Yes,
so.
yes. Yeah, well, those are very directly, they very directly derive from me looking at buildings and actually getting lost in the Barbican quite a lot. I remember when my son was younger and he was at school, he was very interested in photography and long exposures, and we spent quite a few evenings at night in the Barbican trying to take pictures of enormous, great big shapes in big concrete blocks. And the shadows the moon was throwing on more concrete, and quite a lot of these shapes were there. But I never sort of consciously go back home and think, right, I'm going to do something from the Barbican and from what I looked at today, or from the book of brutalist architecture I've been given. It's just, I mean, I think it's true of every designer that our brain processes all the sort of visual stimulus we take in, and it comes out sometimes, you know, years later, sometimes not very consciously, I think. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like, in a way, having talked to you, you're kind of a sponge and the things come together whilst you're making. Is that correct?
Very true. That's very, very true. That's how I develop my ideas. I don't kind of draw things in advance. Sometimes I sketch a shape because it meant something to me. I take quite a lot of pictures, and I often print these pictures and I chop them up and make funny collages out of them. Again, I don't necessarily make jewelry immediately, but something starts an idea there, and it helps me to develop.
And do you always start with a model stage, or do you just sometimes start with your materials, your gold, silver?
I very often, I decide that I want to work with silver or copper or gold or whatever, or use a particular stone, and then I very often start working with the material itself, because it, again, you know, handling the actual metal and the different sort of qualities each metal has enables me to develop something visual. It's an interesting process.
So it's almost like the material inspires the idea process in a way.
Yeah, very much so.
So if you start with gold, it goes in a different direction to, say, if you started with an oxidized black color.
Yes. I mean, I treat gold is such a wonderful material to work with. It's very easy in many ways. It behaves. I always think that maybe that's why they call it. That's why it's such a precious metal, because it kind of has a very, very special quality to it, but then it is also unbelievably expensive. And throughout my career, I only saw the price of it rising more and more and more and more. I used to be incredibly spontaneous with it. I could just like get a piece of gold and chop it up and see what happens with all the cutout pieces. I can't do that now. I have to be so careful. I have to, every time I touch it and file it, I have to be very careful to rinse my hands so the gold dust on them will sink to the bottom of the bowl, and then I can collect the dust and recycle it. But that it's got a magical quality, I got very into recycling pieces, cutting, using up all my leftovers and remelting them, or getting old rings and mixing them up and making my own alloys, which is also a really lovely process. And I never do it with silver, because silver doesn't behave in the same way. In order to sort of recycle your silver, you have to it's much more time consuming, and you need more equipment than what I actually have here. I can see a picture now of a bridge near Liverpool Street, which is unrecognizable now. It's completely encircled by huge, great big modern buildings, but that's what it was like when I lived there. And some
do you think, because you live in London, don't you, and do you think that your work has changed by the development of the city itself around you?
Yeah, inevitably, because I look at things and I take pictures, and yes, and I live quite near the Olympic Park, and so the way the area was transformed at the time, it was really interesting. I used to take lots of pictures of demolition sites, and I am interested in the whole sort of concept of ruined buildings and the sort of regeneration that will happen after the ruin has disappeared. But I also find inspiration in the shapes of the ruins, yeah, I mean, it's all in my work.
Yeah.
I think
I mean, buildings in themselves are part of our landscape as humans, aren't they? And I think there's quite often an influence in organic shapes, for example, the cactuses that even sit behind you now as we speak.
Yes,
to that kind of construct of buildings.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because most people sort of associate me with geometric shapes and buildings and man-made structures, but I am interested in natural shapes, obviously, because I'm also surrounded by them. But I love excuse me, I love cactuses because they've got such a wonderful cartoon quality to them. And early animation, and actually not that early, animation and cartoons are very much part of my influences as well as graffiti and street art and people's scribbles. I've always taken loads and loads of pictures of them and look at them and find them incredibly inspiring and funny and interesting. And that kind of cartoon-like quality has very often snuck into my work. I don't necessarily.
I think it's also playfulness Yeah, but it's also playfulness, isn't it? Like the
Yeah,
way you develop and make your work and the way you place your ideas into the work,
yeah,
there's a playful quality.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And I just sort of like the fun of it. And it's great when I don't necessarily talk when I'm to my clients about, what's behind each piece I made. I really love to listen to, or I let people interpret my jewelry the way they want to interpret it. So I don't go on about it. I don't try to explain what the idea is behind it. I think that's really for me. And once I've done something and I designed it and I've made it, it's no longer so much attached to me. Especially when somebody buys it and they put their own meaning to it, and I really like that, and I'm interested in hearing how other people perceive what I do, especially with jewelry, because jewelry, I mean, at the end of the day, it's meant to be worn. It's meant to maybe enhance somebody's looks, maybe make somebody's dress look more important, or whatever. And so, the people's own interpretation is important, I think.
And I guess fundamentally as well, it's jewelry needs to be able, you need to be able to wear it and feel comfortable as well in it.
Yeah.
And for it to take it, for someone to get that personal relationship with one of your pieces of work.
Yeah. And once it's theirs, it's for them to sort of decide what it is about, possibly. I don't like going on about my where a particular piece came from. I always say, I used to teach quite a lot, and now not so much, but I'm really, really interested in sort of meeting young makers and helping them and trying to sort of, because I know how hard it is now for them. But I often go to degree shows at colleges, and people are very eager to come to me and say, do you want to know what's the meaning of this piece? And I always say, no, I love it. I really love it, but let me think what I think about it, or if I buy it from them and wear it. I'm not really interested in what's behind it. I realize that that's very much part of their teaching, and it's a process which is really, really important when you're studying and sort of learning how to become a designer, that certain things should should come from somewhere, and there should be they should be able to identify the meaning behind an idea. But it's
and I wonder as well if you could tell us a little bit about your sort of making process. I think I remember you saying like you've got a quite traditional making process where your tools are almost your companions.
Yeah, well, I think I share that with a lot of makers. We all love our tools. We're very, very precious about our tools, possibly certain tools. I mean, there are some things that if I'd lost, I'd be lost. I remember once losing a pair of pliers at West Dean College where I was teaching. I left it behind, and I spent the next 3 months feeling unable to do the work that I normally do, because I didn't have that pair of pliers, which was quite absurd. But I got reunited with them about a year later, and I was so happy. I use very, very simple tools. I don't have sophisticated equipment. I'm quite happy making what I make with the tools I've got, because I always think, jewelry, when it first appeared back in the, thousands of years ago, people used to use hardly anything to make the most incredible things, especially where I come from, or, the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians before that, and the Chinese even before that. They used to make the most incredibly complicated, sophisticated metalwork with hardly anything. And I just think that we get bamboozled by too many new sets of pliers that come in the market that will help you bend a material in a particular way. I have personally not found any use for these things. I would love to have a laser welding machine, having said that, but I don't think I'll ever be able to afford it. But yeah, I mean, my tools are very, very basic. Also, because I've got a very small studio, my workshop is very, very small and I can't fit too much in it. So I have to be quite compact. And yes, my hand tools are the most precious thing I've got, and my blowtorch. Excuse me.
I think Amelia has just popped off for a moment. I think her internet's down, but we've just had a question in from Cresta, I think that's how I'm pronouncing your name, it's a lovely name, who says, can you show us any of your favorite tools?
I'm not in my workshop right now, so I think I would have to go downstairs and show it to you. My favorite tools are my pliers, definitely, and one small vise, which is a handheld vise where I can put a tiny piece of wire or a piece of tube and file it flat or file it at a 45-degree angle. And I know that when I take it out, it's going to be exactly that. I got this, I bought it in Geneva many, many, many years ago, shortly after I left college. And I think I'd be lost without it. It's become my absolute favorite. And I think it's a really interesting conversation one can have with makers about their favorite tools,
yeah,
and why they're their favorite tools. It's great. I remember one of my colleagues, a silversmith. I think she did her entire dissertation about that when she was doing a master's degree. And it was great to listen to other makers and how they felt about their own.
I mean, they are an extension of your hands, basically, aren't you? And you totally understand the pressure or how they work intrinsically.
Yeah.
I do apologise. I disappeared again briefly there, so I do apologise.
It's fine.
Modern technology as it is. So
yeah.
But you see yourself as a sort of traditional silver and gold, using traditional techniques, really, don't you, as well?
I do. I mean, I would love to get into, I would love to learn how to use programs that you can design with, sort of CAD kind of thing. But I would want to do that at a time when I don't have anything to make. So it's really, no, I am quite happy with doing things by hand.
Yeah.
And
we've actually got a question from Francis, which kind of links in. It's actually Sarah Packington has actually asked, are all your pieces completely one-off, or do you repeat some of the designs?
No, I do repeat a few of my designs. I do repeat some of my designs, obviously, because I'm somebody who has to make a living out of selling my work. I chose not to go into teaching seriously. And so certain things that sell quite well, I do tend to repeat. But then the repeats are made by hand, so they're never exactly the same. And I kind of like that.
Do you, when you do repeats, do you always sort of make them slightly different on purpose, or do you actually start with the intention to make the object the same thing?
No, because
so
I could make it exactly the same if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But no, I do sort of enjoy, and also the idea that I quite kind of like people, when they own a piece of mine and somebody else buys the same design, that they're not exactly the same. I think
there's a quirkiness and uniqueness. Yeah. And
yeah.
a personality to them as
So
well.
there's always a little tweak. There's always something different, which is apparent to me, but it's not always apparent to other
But does
people.
that also help with your engagement with those kind of pieces as well? It's like you're still having fun, so it doesn't become a laborious act of doing the same
because
thing.
then it'd be so boring. I mean, the sort of I did go through a phase. I think, God, it's a long time ago, of making some pieces in mixed media where I was using photographs and cutouts and all sorts of funny materials, and it became really, really popular, but it took over my life, and I ended up like a factory, just like churning it out, and I didn't think there was much fun in it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really for me. I don't sort of disapprove of people producing multiple. I actually really admire them for doing it, and I think it's a great thing to do. It was just not for me.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now we will ask Frances questions now, because someone has repeated that they'd be interested in this. She said, I love the way your jewellery stands alone and is so recognisably yours, but is there a particular jeweller who has been especially influential?
Do you know, this sounds really, really unkind, and I don't wish to be that, but I don't look at jewellery. Obviously I look at jewellery if I'm doing the Goldsmiths Fair or if I'm with other colleagues, and I very much admire a lot of people's work. I wouldn't single out a particular jeweller, but my work doesn't come from jewellery. None of my influences. I'd say fine art is what I look at. Sculpture. I am completely bowled over by the early work of Cornelia Parker. And I think when I saw her exploding sheds, suddenly a whole world opened up for me, because I realized that I had the same kind of thinking as her. I always thought, things like explosions or ruins or sort of places that have been destroyed are not really represented in art that much, and that's something she sort of said herself, and I hadn't read anything that she had said. I discovered that many years later, and I thought, this is really extraordinary. The other one, I mean, I'm really interested in minimalist art, and the work of Donald Judd has had a big impact on me, I guess, because I really love his sort of minimalist balance. He didn't like to be called a minimalist, I believe, at all. But his work is very quiet, very, very perfect for me. And it makes me feel very sort of peaceful. And one of my dreams is to go to Marfa in Texas and look at the sort of huge works of his and just sort of absorb it all. And I think yes, whenever I have any time to free time to look at things, I will go to a museum or I will go to a gallery and look at art.
I mean, this links with a question Tess has asked. She always thinks jewellery is mini architecture and possibly architect is big jewellery. Have you ever wondered about scaling up your work into sculpture or even a building?
Not a building, but yes, I have thought about scaling it up to make sculpture. I think I'm really timid. I'm kind of scared because I don't know how to go about it, but I've often thought something I made in a small scale could possibly be a wall piece or I could see it in large scale.
I guess it has to be something that you make yourself, because that's such an important aspect of your work, isn't it? So it has to be achievable by you. So
and I haven't collaborated with outsourcing work to be made by other people. I have only done that with jewelry. So I'm a bit scared of trying to scale things up, or rather it's not so much that, it's the fact that I realize how time consuming something like this can be, and to actually keep my own personal making going and my selling, which is, as I said before, it's really, really important because I have to keep myself alive. To actually embark on sort of scaling up my work, on doing something, obviously would take a very, very long chunk of time, because I would have to learn an awful lot, and I would have to sort of work with other people and direct them and all that. That would take me away from my workshop, and possibly stupidly, I don't have people working for me. I'm just my own.
Well, I think another question is, do you see your jewellery as sculpture? Is that how you see your jewellery?
No, I don't.
It's jewellery. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, well, you know, maybe. I don't know. I don't particularly know. No, I very often, you know, I'll make something, maybe it is quite sculptural, but at the end of the day, in the back of my mind, I'll think, you know, what would that look with a particular dress, or, you know, with a particular hairdo, or on a particular hand. I can't kind of divorce it from the body.
Well, that makes sense, because in a way it's part of the body, isn't it? And you're building something to inform that. So there's been another question from Anna Collar. Do you have different approach to commissions from work that is entirely from your own exhibitions? So I think that's just, do you follow a brief specifically, or does it still become quite inspired by your ideas?
I can do that, and I'm interested in doing, in sort of working like in this way, because there's always a little door that opens up the possibility of going into something new. But my experience of working with commissions has, I'd say, very nearly always been one where people came to me to commission something which they want to be entirely me. And they don't want to put too much of themselves into it. They came to me because they like what I do. So I feel lucky that I can continue making what I want to make for them.
Yeah.
But having said that, I really, really love to do commission work, because then you get to see the person, you get to know them, you get to know what they like. It's a wonderful kind of relationship that can develop from this kind of work.
And I kind of get that sense that you work in isolation, as you say, it's just your business. Yeah. But you do have this want for that social and that interaction, and that's almost the same as that kind of relationship that you have when making those pieces of work as well. So we've got another question actually about colour from Kit. What do you think is the importance of colour in your work? And I guess we talked a little bit of about gold already, but maybe also when you use stones within your work as well. What inspires that, or what places them into the work?
Yeah, well, I love colour. Colour's always been important in my work from when I left college. I mean, people who know my very early work, there's not that many who know it, but it was so completely different. I used to work with titanium and niobium and lots of base metals and copper and brass and bronze and steel and stuff. And stones came into my work fairly early on. I was always very, very keen not to just use stones as a little splash of colour. The stone had to be a really, really important part of the design. So I'm very sort of anal about stones and what coloured stones go with what coloured metal. I'm really obsessive about the whole thing. And I love using them, but often it's not so much the colour, It's maybe the inclusions that are in the stones or the particular shapes of stones that I buy. I used to go to Germany a lot and buy oddly cut stones, which didn't necessarily give me ideas then, but I thought this will be useful one day. I'm sure a lot of jewelers will identify with that. We're all magpies, and we all love collecting stones and keeping them.
And I think that's an interesting point as well, because even the way you use metal, it's not finished to an extent that it's polished. There's something about that texture with how you leave it, and the sort of imperfectness about the stones that you use, which I think is really endearing and really makes your work bold and relates it to your influences and understandings as well. You know, the sort of demolition and building sites.
Yeah, I'm not interested in perfection in terms of, you know, technical perfection. I can do it. I know I can, but that's not what I'm into. I quite like to show the sort of marks that tools leave on my work. Not on everything, but on quite a lot of my pieces. You'll see, you know, marks from a hammer or marks from a file. I'm quite interested in leaving them there because it is something that I've made by hand. It is something that I've made with my favorite tools. It is something that I don't need to disguise. I don't need to over polish. I don't need to overwork something. But maybe that comes from the fact that I'm quite impatient. I'm not really interested in the technicality of making.
But do you think you're also interested in the surface as well? You know, like a totally shiny, polished surface.
Yeah,
it's very different. It doesn't have as much character as the slightly rougher brush.
I think it can do. I think it can. I don't like polishing metal because I don't think it suits the kind of work I make. But I have seen people using polishing in the most wonderful way. I think I remember being completely blown over by when I went to Sheffield many years ago and saw some pieces that Rebecca de Quinn had made, where there were sort of two wonderful vessels next to each other, and one was very dark and matte, and the other one was very, very, very perfectly polished silver, and it was just magical. It was absolutely wonderful. It's just that I think, you know, most people think that jewelry should be shiny. I don't particularly like it with my work. I find, you see, a shiny surface actually reflects light back at you. I quite like the light absorbing quality of gold in particular. And it works with the colors of stones I choose to use next to it. But I don't reject polished work. I think it can be absolutely wonderful.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I think there's room for all sorts of things. It's just, you know,
we've been getting some really lovely comments, so thank you everyone for your comments. I think Sarah Drew said it's difficult to think about how to connect things up on a larger scale, as you were saying before, and Joanne said that it's nice to know that a jeweler as experienced as you still gets scared and apprehensive about new work ideas as well, so that's really nice. So I would like to actually open up the floor to anyone's questions. Now I can see that Sarah Drew has a question. So I wonder, Sarah, do you want to ask Daphne directly?
Hi, Daphne. Nice to see you.
Hello.
I was just wondering if, when you were talking about the stones and how particular you are about them, are there ones that you say for yourself? Do you feel like you want to hoard them and keep pieces for yourself?
Oh, to keep for myself, no, but there are certain stones that I'm hesitant to use because I haven't yet come up with something that is perfect in my head for them. But I suppose, yes, we are all magpies, as I said. We do like to keep them. The trouble with me is that I've got a small workshop, as I said before. So I keep things in boxes, and the boxes are usually in my safe. And I'm prone to forgetting what I've got. And it's kind of wonderful, you know, you take them out and you think, oh my God, I've got these, I completely forgot about them. It's kind of, you have a fresh look. And then new ideas come from that. But I would quite like to have the ideal place for me would be a big space where I can actually put them all out and look at them at the same time.
Yes, lovely.
But I do have quite a lot of stones.
What about a piece of work that you make, Daphne? Do you ever get like, I'm so attached that this is now my piece of work?
No, because I do tend to live with my pieces for quite a long time before they go. It's interesting because it can be quite difficult because new work that I make doesn't sell immediately. It may take up to 5 years for it to actually be noticed.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is very, very interesting, and it can be really, really hard because when you first show it and nobody makes any comment about it, you think, oh my God, this is really, really bad. I went down the wrong way, and so I should do something different. I should just move on. But it's the story of my life, really.
So do you feel like you've always got a sort of foot in the past and a foot in the present as well?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. But I sometimes like to rework older ideas, but I think we all do, all designers do. Even if we have moved on to something, you know, old pieces can sort of spark a new idea, which doesn't necessarily relate to that particular piece. But I don't really feel possessive about my pieces. I don't want to, but I suppose I've kept maybe the first couple of pieces I made when I was at college. I kept the very first gold piece I made. I will never destroy it because I remember gold then used to be £35 an ounce, and it's a very, very simple, very minimalist piece, using 18 carats gold, 2 stones, and a piece of steel. I will always keep it because it's my last piece I made. Well, my first piece I made in gold.
Yeah. It's got personal importance.
So it's got importance for me. I'm not going to put it down and recycle it.
I'm going to ask Michelle if Michelle would like to ask her question that she's put up in the chat.
Hi, sorry about that. Hi, Daphne.
Hi.
How are you? I wanted to ask you about how you develop the connections you use in your jewelry, because I think that's one of the things that's really unique about your work is either how you're setting a stone in a non-traditional way or how you're linking pieces up in chains and all those things. How do you develop that?
It's my wonderful design training at college, Michelle. That's what it is. I think, I was made to really sort of think about these things when I was at college. I really did. But, you know, a lot of the sort of interesting ways I have found to hold stones is because I use a lot of beads in my work. So they're always drilled. Yeah. And so it kind of, it's an interesting kind of project brief that I can set myself. You know, how on earth do you hold something like that without covering it up too much?
Right.
With you know, it's playing around and figuring out how to connect things. But I really do put it down to my brilliant tutors I had at Middlesex, because they really made me think about these things. And yeah, I owe it to them. I think both my sort of design tutors and my making tutors. There were two very separate kind of departments on my course, but yeah, I owe it to them. But I don't think I do anything particularly special. It's very nice of you to say that. But I'm just holding beads. I'm making them more important by framing them or putting something around them, or finding putting space between them and the metal sometimes. That's quite interesting.
So when you're working with colored beads, for instance, there was a brooch that was shown that it was a round brooch which had sort of lines in it was an aquamarine.
Yeah, that's a bead.
Right. So is that completely a cold connection?
Yeah. This is a bead that has a bar that goes across it.
Right.
And the bar can't go through the two walls that are next to the bead, so you can't push it through. Right. Because it's flattened on one side and it's got a little bigger area on the other side. Right. So it's so simple. I mean, it's just such a simple idea. I didn't, I've often sort of used, you're probably familiar with the chain necklaces that I used to make with one sort of big chunky stone at the bottom. The shapes that these beads have been cut are just beautiful. And in a way, it would be a shame to cover them up, even on two of their sort of 8 sides with metal. So I wanted to expose the entire stone and show its sculptural quality. And the most sort of the minimal thing I could do with it was just put a bar through it and flatten the end of it so the stone wouldn't fall through. It's no rocket science.
I suppose it's as ancient as jewelry has been made, isn't it? But at the same time, it's the sophistication of just how you actually do it makes it feel much more contemporary.
Yeah, well, that's a very nice comment. Thank you. I don't know. I'm not conscious of these things when I'm doing them. But yeah, no, it's nice to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to invite Maria, if Maria wants to ask her question. Maria there?
Hi. No, I'm just listening on the questions. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Maria's question was about your inspiration from your Greek heritage. And do you think we talked about the sort of landscape, but do you think there is inspiration from your heritage as well?
Possibly. I love looking, when I go to Greece, I do love going to museums and looking at jewelry. And when I was a little girl, my grandparents and my parents always used to, whenever we were on holiday, we used to visit the local museum, which was inevitably full of black and red pottery, which is very interesting in itself, and I think, wonderful. But as a child, I used to get very, very bored of going through room after room after room with red and black pottery or black and red pottery. And what used to really draw my attention was the sort of beautifully lit piece of jewelry, often just the one or two things, in a showcase at the back of the museum. I used to completely love looking at these pieces, and I suppose, yes, it's all in me. That's what I meant when I was referring to the fact that I feel so lucky that I come from 2 different places, and that I do have the Greek in me, and of course I haven't forgotten it, and of course it's all in there. And yeah,
when you sort of talk about those kind of 2 aspects, there's the kind of London and then there's the Greece, do you ever feel like a piece of work merges the 2, or is it quite separate?
Yeah, very much so. My sort of more recent, I think you showed the slide of the sort of angular kind of folded long gold earrings.
Yes.
That's definitely a merging of the 2, because I wouldn't have made these earrings in any other metal than gold. And I think it's the angles, they're very, very subtle, but it's the angles of the metal that expose it to light in a particular way that actually makes it really remind me, I suppose, of you know, the wonderful quality of the pieces that I have seen in a museum, with lines that absolutely do not relate to that kind of work. They're very sort of geometric, very architectural, very city-like. So yeah, definitely.
So it's like this kind of sponge of images and shapes that can come out whilst you're making your work. Yeah. I mean, Tess, I don't know if Tess, you're willing to speak and to show us. She's just said, I'm wearing a pair of Daphne's earrings, if it's interesting for people to see how very wearable your work is. So Tess, I don't know if you want to say hello. We can have a look. Are you there, Tess? Or maybe not.
Am I there? Am I there?
Oh, I can't see you.
You can't see me. Oh dear.
Oh, there you are. Yes. Hello, Tess.
Hello. So they're
beautiful
pieces that I bought at the Oxford Gallery very many years ago, and I absolutely love them. I really, really love them, and wear them for best for, as you can see, I'm in a hoodie, so I can wear them at any point in the day, really. They're lovely, and thank you, Daphne. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. It's really nice to see you. And it's really nice what you said about you can wear them with anything, because a lot of what I make, not everything, I want people to be able to wear it day and night with and not think too much about what it will go with.
Yeah.
But not with all my work. But it's really nice. It's really nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wonder, thank you, Tess. It's great to see them. Thank you. Ruth King, I wonder if you want to ask your question that you put up, if you're there, Ruth.
Hello, yes, I'm here. And actually I can vouch in a similar way to Tess as well. My wedding ring and engagement ring were both made by Daphne, and people who comment on them always go up in my estimations. So there you go, Daphne. I think that's probably hopefully a compliment as well, because I adore them. I don't wear the necklace I have as much because it's just far too special, but just I absolutely every day look at them with joy, genuine joy, Daphne. So thank you again so much for them, and I've had them for 14-15 years now. I just wanted to say that it is fantastic. I can't always afford to buy a new piece of yours, obviously, but it's amazing and so exciting and inspirational to look even just on your website at how your work changes and develops and moves on. And there isn't really a piece I ever don't love, but within all of that, I'm desperately intrigued to know what's coming next.
I don't know. I kind of do know. I've been working on a few pieces which actually came from a collaboration I did a couple of years ago with Einar Christensen, where we each picked an element of each other's work that we admired, but decided very much that we were not going to make pieces together, but we were going to continue making our own work, she her metal work and me my jewelry, but we would use that element that we liked. So I started making all these sort of grid pieces, or pixelated pieces as I call them, because they look a bit like pixelated images. And the sort of direct inspiration from them was the images of Amelia showed them earlier on, of village rooftops from Greece and the Middle East. And so all this kind of work which combines a sort of solid area with something which looks a lot lighter and sort of starts to disappear. That's an element of Einar's work which I took to use in my own work. And so there's quite a lot of, I'm interested in that at the moment. So I'm trying to, partly because we also have an exhibition at the Scottish Gallery in 2022. And I need to make some more, another collection, because most of those pieces sold amazingly. And so I'm kind of working with that kind of idea in mind and expanding that. So for the craft festival, I actually made one pair of earrings and 2 pendants, using this sort of pixelated idea, and very much a handmade one, because I could have designed that on a CAD program really easily, and it would have been absolutely perfect. But I like the sort of slight imperfections again, of the shapes. But I worked with square and oblong shapes, and this time I didn't combine them with a solid area at all, but I used pearls, because pearls are very round and very sort of, again, I quite like their sort of completely spherical shape, and their cartoon quality, if you want, or the way that I've used them before. So I kind of, yeah, I'm going to make a collection of work based on that. So I've got to expand. That was very much the beginning of an idea, and it was great to have the digital fair to give me a chance to do something, because it was a good excuse. You know, we all like to work to an end, to a project, to an exhibition, and COVID has completely taken so much of that away from us, and we need a sort of project to work towards, especially with developing ideas. You know, we don't have the kind of feedback we get from other colleagues. I have really missed the interaction with other makers. I mean, we can still do it on Zoom, but it's not the same. And I just realized how important it is to find, you know, set a brief to work towards. And having the digital fair gave me a reason to try and play around with a couple of ideas that maybe I've been harboring in my head, but haven't actually had the excuse to get down to do it.
Brilliant.
I suppose, you know, in the last year, I didn't actually make an awful lot of work. I sort of ground to a halt and really used the time to become much more savvy in the digital world. I learned a lot about, well, I put a shop on my website. I mean, it was about time I did it, but it really was I spent the best part of the year trying to do that. Well,
so are you looking forward to then having that exhibition next year to aim for, to really?
Very much so. I think every maker has really missed, because you can't replace a 3-dimensional object with 2D. You really can't. But at the same time, I'm so grateful we can do what we can do. And it is useful because it has kicked me into action, and I did need to put a shop on my website, and it was good to learn how to make little videos, and it is fun, and it is something new, and
brilliant.
You might as well.
Well, I think that was a good question to end on, and I'm afraid we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I could talk to you all afternoon, Daphne, in absolute truth. So I do apologise that we have to draw to a close. It's been such a pleasure. I would like to thank everyone for joining us. You've been an amazing audience, so thank you. And thank you for so many insightful questions. To find out more about the Crafts Council, you can sign up to our mailing list on www.craftscouncil.org or follow us on social media. I would also like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to Digital Crafts Festival for inviting me to host this talk, and also to Merrin for all her support during this digital session. It's been really, really amazing. So finally, Daphne, I'm sure all the audience, and I can see in the comments, in actual fact, some really lovely comments, will agree with me that it's been truly inspiring talking to you. You've been talking so eloquently and engagingly about your work and how you feel and your life. It's been an absolute delight. So a really big thank you. Just to remind everyone, I'm sure you already know, but you can visit Daphne's stand and a vast array of other makers at Digital Craft Festival until the 28th of March. I highly recommend that you do so, all from the comfort of your sofas. So do go. And I can see loads of thanks, and I'd like to say thank you and goodbye, everyone. It's been great.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. It's been absolutely wonderful and a lovely opportunity. Thank you.
Oh. All right, then I'm going to stop recording.